They're bad
I
at
know.
going all in. They love being half pregnant. Like, let me just dip my toe in. Let me just see. Oh, is it cold? Oh, is it lukewarm? Are you ready? No, okay, we won't go in yet. Just go all in.
Social platforms are going to be the new OTAs.
Whoever owns the moment of intent controls the bookings.
Are we going to get a bubble? There are thousands of hotels with hundreds of rooms that still need to be filled.
We're going to be focused on this independent, cool lifestyle and luxury, but I have to market like a bank.
I think that we can give our 2 cents into the stories that are going on.
Will be in your ears and on your screens every Friday morning.
Let's do it.
Let's roll.
This is the gold, bro. This is the gold.
Welcome to This Week in Hospitality, a weekly analysis designed for the people building the next generation of great hospitality brands. Each Friday, we take you beyond the headlines to examine the ideas, the market forces, and the cultural shifts reshaping travel and lodging. This show exists for independent owners, operators, and entrepreneurs who don't have time to sift through noise, but who want to understand what actually matters and how the week's developments will impact the work they're doing on the ground. Our conversations are guided by a team whose experiences span every corner of the industry. We've got Ben Wolf, the visionary behind Onera, one of the most distinctive landscape hotel concepts in the Texas Hill Country, and Awasi, a hotel marketing and growth firm elevating experiential hotels across the states. We've also got Scott Eddy, one of the most respected voices in global hospitality storytelling, trusted by luxury hotel brands and tourism boards around the world to shape how they connect with today's traveler. And we've also got Edwin Kramer, a leader who has run some of the world's most admired luxury hotels as general manager at brands like Four Seasons, Edition, and Nobu Hotels. Edwin brings an operator's precision and a global lens to every conversation. And I'm Zach Boozy-Cruz, head of growth at Journey, a loyalty platform for the world's top independently owned and operated hospitality brands, and host of Behind the Stays, where I've spent years interviewing the founders and creators building remarkable hospitality brands. Together, we break down the news, identify the real opportunities, and help you think more clearly about the future you're building towards. All right, friends, without further ado, get ready to dive into This Week in Hospitality. All right, gentlemen, welcome to another fantastic episode of This Week in Hospitality. It has been a crazy week of life, of news, of work, all the good things. Here in the United States, we're preparing for what will hopefully be a long weekend for many of us over Thanksgiving. And I just wanted to start by saying I'm thankful for you guys. I'm thankful for you guys taking time out of your incredibly busy lives every week to have this conversation. The feedback that we've gotten from folks already has been amazing, and hopefully we can continue to build a name for our respective selves, the name for the show. Hopefully people continue to find value in the content that we produce each week. All right, I want to dive into our first story here. So, a first story of this week is a scoop that was reported by Skift that Capital One, which is a major bank here in the United States, is preparing to buy the installed software from Hopper, the same software that currently powers Capital One Travel and is already hiring Hopper's hotel and engineering teams. For those who don't remember Hopper or aren't familiar with Hopper, Hopper was a consumer-facing OTA that launched primarily in the States. They brokered a deal with Capital One to power Capital One's travel portal, which is similar to the portal that Chase and Amex use, for instance. But Hopper was the underlying technology for that platform. A few key details here about this deal that I think are interesting. Number one, this isn't just about maintaining a booking portal. It's clear that Capital One, at least by the reporting that Skift did, wants direct hotel relationships and the underlying tech talent to build their own travel and fintech stack. So again, this isn't a licensing deal. This is a full-on purchase of the underlying software that Hopper has used. Hopper team members in Europe and Canada are already receiving job offers from Capital One, which is interesting. So they're interested again in bringing people that not just the software, but bringing people who understand the software, bringing people who understand the industry into the fold. And then Hopper, which again started as a consumer-facing OTA, has now pivoted to being actually 90% B2B. So powering travel for Capital One, Uber, banks, airlines, and more. Its consumer business is basically gone. Even if you go and search for them today, it's hard to find like a consumer-facing site. And all of this is happening, or I should say, as all of this is happening, Hopper's founders quietly co-founded another company in the carbon removal space called Deep Sky. And folks from Airbnb's former leadership team are a part of this new venture as well. So we have a major bank absorbing a travel tech company, Hopper pivoting almost entirely to B2B. We've got key execs building a totally separate climate venture that has nothing to do with travel. So this once IPO-bound OTA has basically disappeared into the pipes of financial institutions. Scott, I want to start with you here. Is this the moment where banks become the new OTAs? It feels really weird even saying that. What does this mean from your perspective on hotel distribution? How does loyalty change when the card issuer owns the booking engine and the guest relationship? What are your thoughts on this story?
So what Capital One is doing here is one of the most important moves in travel right now. This is not a bank buying a travel widget. This is a bank buying the engine that understands traveler intent. This is a loyalty play, a behavioral economics play, for lack of a better word. And it's a long-term ecosystem play wrapped inside of a single acquisition. Let's break this down. Banks understand everything about human behavior. They see how you spend. They see when you spend. They see when your spending slows down. They see when you invest in wellness. They see when you book a flight. They see the emotional patterns through financial actions. Hotels only see persons when they step into the travel mode. OTAs only see a person when they start searching. But banks see the whole human. And just on a, not really a personal note, but a real life example, Capital One also bought Discover Card not too long ago.
That's right. Yeah.
Simultaneously, so Capital One happens to be my main bank, and simultaneously they dropped their relationship with MasterCard, which means all debit cards for your personal bank account with Capital One now switched over to Discover. So me in 15, 20 different countries a year, and now traveling all around Asia, I am having nothing but headaches because Discover is not widely taken everywhere like MasterCard is. So, it's fantastic on one side, but stop making these bonehead moves that are just crippling your consumers. I called Capital One the other day and they said they're getting 100 calls a day from people complaining that Discover's not accepted anywhere. So, but I do think this is a genius move. And the reason I brought that up is they're just doubling down on anything. I just think these banks have so much cash, and if they start moving in this direction, do I think that they're going to be the new OTAs? Of course not. But they're going to nudge themselves in at a very aggressive pace where, like, who's going to stop them? You know what I mean?
Yeah. I think your point too about their insight into the consumer, they have more depth and breadth than anyone else does. You might, if you're loyal to Marriott, you might have a Marriott card, right? You might have a Hilton card, right? And if you are a loyal member to that hotel chain, they'll get some insight into your spend with them. But again, to your point, if I stay at Hilton once, right? If I stay at Marriott once, but then they've no other insight into how I spend, daily. Whereas Capital One does. To your point, they're also my main bank. They know everything about me, for better or for worse, right? And so it's a fascinating play. I think to our earlier conversation a couple of weeks ago about how loyalty is being reimagined, it really, they are uniquely empowered to disrupt loyalty as we know it. They are uniquely situated to become a real ally to hotel brands and hotel chains. Now the question is, like, will they be able to create an economic structure and a partnership that makes sense there? And I think that's the jury's still out on that. But Edwin, what are your thoughts on this? I know that at Capital One and Hopper are not as widely known and or used in Europe and other parts of the world. But what are your thoughts on this general strategy of a major bank, major credit card company coming in and buying this really crucial travel tech?
Yeah. No, you're absolutely right. Right. So when I read the story first, I didn't really know who Capital One were. So for any listeners here in Europe or in Africa or in Asia, if Capital One is not known to you, nor Hopper, that's okay. I didn't know that either. But I think it's still very relevant because this may not stop with this bank. This may happen elsewhere, right? When this model turns into a success. This is I sort of see it as the Amazonification of travel. And a bank built on, or a new OTA built on top of a bank ecosystem. I think the problem here is that every time we make moves like this, even though very clever, and I agree with Scott, is that we're getting further and further away from the guest in these situations. And we're craving in this world for, and everybody's talking about personalization, about data, about understanding the guest profile. And the more layers we add into this, the harder it's going to be to really understand what that guest really wants. And if the bank is now the one who owns the entire process and keeps that data, and that data no longer sits with hotels, then from a guest perspective, what's that going to do? I made a pledge towards my bank. I gave them my loyalty. I think there might be some trouble for loyalty programs here because if the banks are clever and they, incentivize and they hold the money, they hold all the incentives within their ecosystems, and that might be a problem for some of the loyalty programs too. But from a hotel perspective and from a brand perspective, if you're no longer in that entire mix of holding guest data, and guests long for recognition and long for even more than ever for hotels to really understand them, we're going to get a little disparity, I think.
What I think is also interesting, and Ben, I want to get your take here as well, is the entire economic structure, right, of the OTA. Capital One has an opportunity to throw that out of the water, right? They don't necessarily need a commission, if you will, on every booking. And so if they're smart, right, and they figure out how to play this right by, again, the hotels and also the consumers, you end up creating a potentially great relationship. If it's hey, we're going to take 1%, 2%. Like what if they dramatically undercut the OTAs because they can? Because again, that's not their core business model. It'll be interesting to see how they play with economics and how they make it make sense for hotel partners. So yeah, Ben, what do you think about this broader shift, this broader trend? Major financial institutions, again, they've been in the points game for a while. They've been in loyalty adjacent, if you will, for a while. But this is kind of going a little bit deeper into becoming the official booking engine, right? Utilizing this major travel tech in a different way. What are your thoughts here?
Yeah, I think everyone's gunning for the OTAs, right? You got the banks going for them. You got agentic AI. You got social media platforms. So yeah, it's like sharks in the water for the bookings, Expedias and Airbnbs of the world. And so it'll be interesting to see. I mean, as you said, a lot of these other platforms can afford to offer a very similar or the same service at a fraction of the commission price. So yeah, I'm very interested to see how this evolves. Is this sort of the end of an era? Do some of those companies get gobbled up by financial institutions, by social media platforms, and then it just becomes one arm of their business? So I think the financial institutions are interesting just because of how integrated into the points universe they are. As I've said before, I'm a big fan of Chase and Chase Travel and Ultimate Rewards, and I'm a loyalist there. So if they can make my booking loyalty sort of, OTA experience seamless within Chase, then, that's going to be the path of least resistance for me as a consumer. So, yeah, I think it makes a lot of sense. And I'm just kind of curious to see how it evolves and how the OTAs respond and try to, stay ahead and differentiate.
Yeah, we need to watch out that loyalty doesn't become a financial product, right? That it's not that it stays with a hotel product. I think there's a danger there.
There is. And again, I think all of this will be in the execution. There is sort of this unique opportunity that, again, financial institutions like Capital One have, where they could actually become a data sharer, right? I mean, they have so much data on the consumer, and again, because Zach as a customer of Capital One, Capital One only cares to an extent, right? Where Zach stays, right? That's not the point of entry for them as for me as a customer of theirs, and so because of that, they don't necessarily need to be this data hoarder, right? Like some of these loyalty programs are today, right? And so if they can overcome that hump, and if they can totally disrupt the OTA's financial model and say, hey, hotel partners, not only are we going to like charge you half of, if not more than that, what the OTAs charge, we're also going to empower you with data that you've always wanted about your travelers that you've never had in a way that still protects the consumer. Then I do think it's a very compelling case. So I'm interested to watch the story and see how it evolves. I want to go to our next story, guys. So this is a story actually that was reported. I found it on LinkedIn. Sometimes you find great content on LinkedIn, great stories on LinkedIn that the major media outlets have not picked up yet. This actually comes from a friend of mine, Ashley Ching. She's the founder and CEO of InHaven. She does great investigative journalism in the hospitality industry, kind of as in addition to leading her company, obviously. So I wanted to bring this story into the queue because it's related to everything happening with Sondor. So we've talked about Sondor. Everyone's been talking about Sondor for the last couple of weeks and the incredible fallout between their breakup with Marriott. But Ashley Ching, again, who's founder and CEO of InHaven, she broke this story about another major hospitality collapse called LuxUrban Hotels. They're on the New York Stock Exchange at LUXH. And what was really interesting about this story is it happened literally 2 months before the Sondor fallout. And so I wanted to just quickly bring this to folks' attention. If you haven't heard about this story, I certainly hadn't. And then we can figure out whether there's a broader trend here that's worth discussing. Here are the kind of key points of the LuxUrban Hotels fallout. So LuxUrban followed a master lease asset light model that was similar to the model that Sondor followed. The company IPO'd in 2022, raising $13.5 million, and then rapidly expanded. So they grew from 118 rooms in 2021 to more than 1,400 rooms by the end of 2023 across 14 different hotels. In 2023, they landed a significant partnership with Wyndham, which planned to bring 16 LuxUrban hotels into the trademark collection. And Wyndham also said they would provide up to 50% of capital for new acquisition. So a pretty incredible deal for this startup. At face value, LuxUrban looked like a fast-rising conversion partner, riding industry tailwinds, but beneath the surface, the company was struggling, Ashley reports. So in September 2025, LuxUrban filed for bankruptcy, citing negative cash flow from operations and dependence on merchant cash advances, effectively short-term, high-interest financing that drained their operational cash daily. By October, the filing had fully converted to Chapter 7 liquidation, forcing the immediate closure of hotels, leaving guests without rooms, employees without pay, and multiple properties abandoned. Again, Ashley's analysis highlights a bit of a pattern here. So another hospitality company pursuing aggressive master leases, rapidly scaling, also, be getting the endorsements of the big brands only to unravel seemingly overnight. So Ben, I want to start with you here because we've talked about this over the last couple of weeks. Sondor is not the first time we've seen this collapse of a short-term rental brand trying to flirt with the idea of, or really sort of like live in the intersection of short-term rental and hotel space. We've had the Guild, we've had Lyric, we've had others sort of go up in smokes as well. What do you think this story suggests? Any new insight to garner here, or are we basically just reaffirming again and again, this model just doesn't quite make sense?
Yeah, so I'm going to call it what it is in my eyes, and these companies they're lease arbitrage companies, right? That there's an arbitrage that at one point there was an arbitrage. I was actually in this business for one point, right? Where it's like you could lease residential apartments, townhomes, floors of buildings, and make a spread on short-term renting them before regulation caught up, before a ton of people were doing this. There was an arbitrage, but all arbitrages come to an end. And I think that that's happened over the past few years. And these companies just, they took VC money as a tech play, a high growth play, and a brand play, none of which I think are true to the fundamentals of the business, which is a lease arbitrage model. So I think that's been the crux of the issue. And there's a graveyard littered with companies that have gone by the wayside trying to follow this same formula. So, hopefully some lessons are learned here, and this same model is not played out again with more, deaths of these kind of companies in the future. Now, I think that the evolution of the short-term rental market and regulation is a big piece of the story here that a lot of people aren't talking about. There's all this talk of like, oh, they took high interest cash advance money and blah, blah. It's like, yeah, that's a symptom of the bigger issue that they're chasing growth at all costs and taking dumb money. But the crux of the issue, I think, is that a lot of these companies came in, they took residential leases that were attractive. Some of those early properties did make money, they did make sense. And then regulation caught up, started cracking down. You could no longer do that. So they then had to lease hotels. Now, a hotel zoned building's highest and best use includes food and beverage revenue, includes other ancillary revenue, most of which the Sondor of the world, the apart hotels of the world are not benefiting from, but then they're still paying that same highest and best use lease rate. So I think that like there was just an unwillingness to acknowledge the landscape has changed, and they just kept taken on bad leases when the cost of the leases didn't make sense with the business model. So that's what I think happened. I do think that there is less of a likelihood of it happening again because those early attractive leases are no longer available. So I don't know that like one of these companies would be able to kind of get enough steam and momentum to the point where they could attract VC money, try and blow it out of the water, grow, and then start taking on bad leases. I don't know if that situation like exists today. So that's what I think happened. Hopefully we'll avoid the same fate of future companies.
Scott, I want to bring you in here. What do you think the, dare I say, sort of like obsession or the brands of the world, the hotel brands of the world have with these apartment style hotels? Like, is this like, again, Wyndham was trying to get into this game. Marriott obviously trying to get in this game. Like, what do they see? Is it really just is it units? Is it like key count? At the end of the day, like, talk to us a little bit about what you think the initial attraction to these types of businesses are from a hotel brand's perspective.
Here, I think that the collapse is not shocking. It's an inevitable outcome of the business model that looks good at scale, but fundamentally fragile. And, these master lease companies, they grow fast. They sign dozens of leases. They scale inventory. They get brand recognition. Everything looks great until the house of cards falls down. So, I mean, you make quick money and you lose a lot. And, I'm really hoping that everybody who complains about not having staff is sitting down watching thousands of people lose their job every time one of these companies go under. And are they out there attacking the employees? Now, let's go backwards and I'll answer your question. So the apart hotel model is not common in the US, but it's very common in Europe and Asia. And I primarily lived in these type of places my whole time, all 17 years that I lived in Europe and Asia. I think they are fantastic. It is a hotel. They're just catered towards long-term stays. So, it is a hotel. And I do think that there's much more money in these type of places than regular hotels. And I think that we're going to see them pop up significantly, especially in the big metro areas in the US, because I already see a couple planned for Miami because you need them, because corporate people come in and out so often, stay for a month, stay for 2 weeks, whatever it is. But these things are fantastic. It's a great product that I've actually lived in, and I do not think that we've seen the last of these. I think that all these brands are going to have them eventually.
So Edwin, do you think then, per Ben's earlier comments, is the missing component here like F&B and amenities, basically? Like, is that the challenge here? Like Sondor, I stayed in a few Sondors. I don't know if this is true or not. I've never stayed at a Sondor that did have like an F&B or any sort of like meaningful amenity. I don't know if they had some that had that. Mint House, on the other hand, right, which is a similar player. I've stayed at their property on 70 Pine in New York. They have this incredible Michelin star restaurant on the ground floor. Obviously, they don't own or operate that restaurant, but it's a part of the building, right? So it feels like the restaurant on the lobby. It feels like it has a lobby bar and a lobby restaurant, etc. I think that model is really interesting. But Edwin, I want to bring you in here. What are your thoughts on sort of the missing component then? If what Scott says is true, if the product is great, right? If the experience is great, right? The major hotel brands are clearly attracted to this asset type. What's the missing ingredient to make this work?
Yeah, so it could depend on the city. It could depend on the location. Amenities are always great. They're obviously not the revenue drivers or the profit drivers. So how they assist in the overall picture, that depends on location. I mean, there's some really great companies that do those apart hotels. In reference to what Scott said. There's a big company here in Europe that's going to expand in the US called the Social Hub, but they own the assets. But I think it's more in the way these deals are set up, right? So some of these leaseholders take on really heavy per room prices per annum, and then try to run a hotel model with a lot lower prices because you can't ask for luxury hotel rates. And there's a gap, right? And so when you get a downfall, these leases are very rigid. They're often commanding a much higher return for the owner. And if there's a downfall, unlike you, if you're owner operator, because then you also have your fixed your fixed costs. You need to pay your mortgage. You need to pay your debt. But you have a lot more options there to be flexible, right, with your lenders. And I think the way the model could work, because I quite like the model for people who want to come to market and not want to buy an asset. But you need to have cash. And you need to have cash to sit through bad periods, which normally, if you have a bank behind you, you will have. But I think the ones who are going to collapse are the ones who can sit it out for a couple of months. They want to grow. You have a couple of bad months. You need to pay these giant leases, and then you just go under. I think the real issues here, like Scott said, that all these companies and people who are able to get these leases, get into the market and fail. We're going to get a lot of these stories where people are afraid of stepping into this market segment, and that's a shame because they could be real great business concepts. So I think it's one to see. I know there's a lot of people who can rent smaller hotels to start their first hotel business. There are people who don't want to sell their asset. They'll do a leasehold for property. There are ways of getting into this business without needing that much cash. But I think when you're trying to scale this fast and you're not very cash flow rich, then that's a problem.
Yeah,
go ahead, Ben.
One final point. So I love what Scott and Edwin said, and I think that the apart hotel model does make sense for like mid to longer term stays. That's not what a lot of these companies like Sondor and others are really like touting and putting forward. So if the model is for more mid to longer term stays, that has to be negotiated and sort of factored into the lease that they're signing. And it may actually open up other building types, right? Depending on the city, there might be different regulation for stays of longer than a week, obviously longer than a month. There are always different regulations. So that can impact what buildings you can lease and therefore the cost of those leases. But I love the lease model, and I'm going to talk about this more in Spice of the Week. Like, we are leasing for our development project in Florida, and so I see the value in leases, but our lease is purely variable based on revenue, right? We don't have these massive, fixed cost leases that I think all these companies got caught with. So totally comes down to structuring, and totally comes down to the buildings that you can actually lease, because if you can lease a building that's residential or some sort of version of residential, then you can get a much better price.
Restaurants have been doing this for decades, if not longer, right? There's very few restaurant owners who actually own their building, and that works. And sometimes it doesn't work. It's the same problem. If they're not cash rich, they'll go under, and that's why so many businesses fail. And maybe the system needs to change. Maybe the flexibility that owners have with banks and the support, maybe that's the kind of support these kind of leasehold agreements need to have with owners, that owners take a less guaranteed ROI or a lease per month, but maybe they benefit in the upturn of the hotel. Maybe there's a different structure model so that it's not that rigid, because it doesn't help the owners either, right? I know there's a lot of owners of Sondor buildings and others right now who lost confidence. Who are they going to go to bed with? They haven't been paid. It takes months for somebody new to come in. I mean, it's complicated. and nobody wins in this situation.
Yeah, classic misaligned incentives problem, right? Like that's kind of where, and you want to figure out a way to align them. But go ahead.
Yeah. Scott, do you want to add anything else?
No, I'm good. I mean, these guys put the cherry on top.
Amazing. Yeah, I do think last point on this is it'd be interesting for us to do a deeper dive. If any of our listeners have context into the mint house business, I've stayed at a couple of mint houses, and I think again they are straddling this like really interesting line between apartment style hotels, but also in exceptional buildings that are packed with amenities. And so again, I have no insight into how their business is actually doing, but it would be interesting to see if maybe that model is worth studying if they've figured out something that others haven't. All right. The next story, our final story of the week, is a story on hotel and flight bookings are coming to Google's AI mode. So AI mode is something that you have probably all experienced by now. You enter a search into Google and an AI summary of that search is automatically generated, or an AI response, I should say, of that search is automatically generated. Google announced earlier this week that flight and hotel bookings and planning are coming to their AI mode. So the implications of this are huge. Travel booking could shift from multiple tabs and OTAs and brand sites into a single conversational interface inside Google Search. For hotels and operators, this signals a potential upstream shift in the guest journey. Decisions may increasingly happen inside Google. Google says that they will not be the merchant of record. So they say that they might take bookings directly in its AI mode for search, but that they will not be the merchant of record. So it'll be interesting to see how all of this plays out. Google already has agentic booking for restaurants, events, and wellness. So hotels and flights just make sense. It's a natural extension of work they're already doing. The booking flow is still under development, so we don't have a lot of details exactly, on what it will look like to be able to book direct through, and I should say by direct, I mean book on Google via AI mode, and so we don't know what that booking flow or experience will look like yet. But again, to clarify, Google does say that they will not be the merchant of record, so it'll be interesting to see how that plays out. Lots of unanswered questions here, but Edwin, I want to start with you here. What do you think this signals? Are you excited about this? Where do you think the opportunity exists for hotel operators? Is this a win for operators? Is this something that we need to be worried about? Talk to us a little bit about your thoughts on this story.
Yeah, so I mean, Google already uses AI, right? And you get a great summary. But I think the big change here is that, the agentic, the fact that the AI is a travel agent now for you, is that they can take actions for you, right? So it's not just going to give you information. They can actually make a booking, which from a consumer point of view is going to be great. You're going to have that bond just like you might have a ChatGPT. It's ease of use. So I would welcome this from various different angles. You're right. Google doesn't own the booking, right? They're just a gateway that connects users to their preferred partners, right? So the booking will stay with Expedia, with Booking.com, with Marriott, with whoever it is. I think the problem here is that first problem here is for hotels is right now we're trying to convince guests, even if they're coming through OTAs, is to book direct because then you can get guest data, right? We just talked about this just before now too. In tomorrow's world, it's Google who give you options, who let you book perhaps through brand or through OTAs, and then the hotel doesn't own anything right anymore, right? Because you may not, as a customer or as a guest, you may not even get to a hotel's website. I mean, that part is entirely gone. So I think that's the first thing. How relevant our hotel website is going to be. Fewer visits, fewer direct bookings. That's the number one, I think, first. So Google is just, they're sort of a conversation layer between decision and booking is what they're placing in. Really becoming sort of the front door to the travel industry. I think the good news is that they're not becoming a loyalty program, right? Guests can still choose, but the bad side to this is, do guests still care, or are they're going to choose with what Google recommends? If you don't put in that I'm a Hilton loyalty member, and you need to look for that, but if you put in, find me a hotel in center of Amsterdam, 3-star, that has spa, it's close to A, B, and C, and you get the recommendations, then what happens there? I think the other thing, if you read the article, and we don't know where this is going to go yet, but if they're partnering with certain brands, as they say, does that mean if you're not in, that you're out? I think there's a big question right there. What's going to happen if you're not partnering with Google, just like people are not partnering necessarily with OTAs. And then guest data is a big thing, and we just talked about this too. It's another example. Who's going to own this? Where is this going to sit? Where is this going to stay? And if less bookings directly come in to the hotel, what's that connection with guests? Well, where are you going to stay when it comes to holding and owning guest data? So I think there's a lot of questions here that need to be answered. And from a consumer perspective, I think this is great. We knew this was going to get somewhere. Knowing that ChatGPT can do a lot of these tasks for you already. I have to say, I was having a conversation this week with colleagues back in Barcelona, and they tried this and were sent to Berlin to a hotel that didn't exist. So it ain't flawless yet. And I think the other thing is it's going to take some time for this to get and win the trust of guests, right? So right now, I trust my booking from a friend because I'm a loyalty member, because I've stayed somewhere, because of a story I've been told. On Google, I've always been given options, and I still have to choose. If Google now makes a choice for me, and the choice is crappy, will I go there next? And it won't be perfect right from the beginning, right? I think we need to be realistic because it's not a travel agent sitting in front of you with the sparkle in the eye or looking at your sparkle in the eye when they mention, a certain hotel or a certain destination. It's an engine. And that human touch of, I think I know what you want because you just told me that story and because you smiled and you laughed and that spark in your eye, that we're not going to replace.
Yeah. Ben, I want to get your thoughts on, in particular, I think this opens up a big opportunity for independent hotels and even just hotels more generally who might exist on the second or third plus pages of Google. With obviously with AI search, you're able to be much more curated. The entire LLM is structured to bring you the closest proximity to what they think you actually want, right? Which is very different than what Edwin was suggesting with the standard 10 blue links that we're all used to of giving customers choice, and it really just becomes who's best at SEO. Like the best hotel is really just who's
yep.
what hotel has the best SEO strategy. So we're obviously moving away from that. What opportunity do you think this opens up, and how are you thinking about this development? Is it something you're really excited about? Do you think it's something that your partners will be excited about? Does it open up opportunity, or does it limit opportunity?
I think it just increases the value of differentiation of offering, right? If you have differentiated amenities, if you have something unique that I'm specifically searching for, now the AI is going to help me find that and then book it seamlessly, as opposed to digging through pages and pages of Google like you're describing. So I think those that will win will have differentiated offering that respond to specific questions and pain points that guests will have, that they'll ask AI on the first go around, or we'll have conversations like, okay, you found these 10 hotels. Which one has a sauna I can use? Which one has an e-bike room, like a Peloton room I can use? So I think that those types of things and that type of dialogue is actually going to bring differentiated product to the forefront that maybe isn't the best at SEO, but has a great product, you're still going to need a robust online presence, but you don't have to show up on the first page of Google, right? You need a great website that AI can, very easily interact with, right? That answers questions, that highlights key features that you want the AI to pick up on. And it's customer reviews are going to be as important as ever. And volume of reviews is what I've heard, like that AI over indexes for volume even more than score. So if you have thousands of reviews and you're a 4.5, you might actually be better off than somebody that only has hundreds of reviews that's a 4.8 or a 4.9. So I do think that that will further emphasize the value of guest experience, and to some extent, like who's kind of been in market and had the brand value in a market for the longest. So I think differentiation and still having a robust web presence that AI is sort of going to easily interact with, or those will be the properties that win in this new environment.
It'll be interesting to see too how much choice the consumer is given on like where to actually book, right? So I can imagine a world where Google tells you, hey, you can book through Expedia, and it's going to cost you this, and you'll earn this many one key points, right? Versus you could book through Chase if you're a Chase member, and you could do that. It'll basically like bring in an incredible amount of transparency to like where the best place to book this particular stay on your particular dates actually is, which today is nearly impossible. Like it is so hard to know, and we all do this all the time, right? There's so much fluctuation, right? In terms of price, in terms of availability, in terms of who's running a specific, a promo right now. My quick anecdote here: we just moved, so we were buying a bunch of new pots and pans, and my wife was like looking at this one website, the brand's website, right? And she's like, "Oh, like they have this great Black Friday promotion. It's going to be 40% off or whatever. Let's buy this." I was like, let's just check like Nordstrom, Macy's, the department stores, see if they have it. The exact same product, right? For literally 50% off of the Black Friday deal that the main brand was running, right? Insane. I mean, we got these pants for like dirt cheap. Anyways, point being, like, that takes a lot of time to go do all that investigation. That time is going to take milliseconds now. So it'll be interesting to see, again, how much Google allows for this. And to your earlier point, Edwin, I think this is where their partnerships come in. It's like, who's in and who's out. If they're striking deals with Marriott, Hilton, Hyatt, the big flags, which they are, how much does that, how much leverage do those brands have over the booking engine, the booking options, I should say, that consumers are shown?
Yeah, I think it can both help and hurt direct bookings as well, by the way. I know that there was kind of concern mentioned around that. I think on one hand, booking direct, you have more flexibility in terms of how you price, right? You can offer a cheaper price if it's direct than going through an OTA where you're going to have to pay a commission. On the flip side of that, those of us who drive a lot of bookings direct through places like Instagram, we're reaching an aspirational customer. They're not price sensitive. They're kind of willing to pay whatever. So we often price the same as OTAs and scoop the margin, which we can then use that margin to go back into marketing and brand work. So that will be harder to do with more transparency. So I think, it can kind of go either way on the direct booking side of things.
Scott, any thoughts on this story too?
Yeah, I mean, Google didn't make a huge splash about this, but they didn't need to. Adding hotel and flight booking directly into AI mode, it fundamentally changes the traveler journey. For decades, the journey had steps: search, research, compare, decide, book. Now Google collapses that entire journey into one conversation. A traveler can say, find me a beachfront hotel in Greece with amazing food and make sure there's only 5-star reviews for the past 30 days. I mean, that is a very, very specific ask. What does that mean for hotels? It means the power of visibility is, I mean, if your content is structured incorrectly or correctly, or your photos are outdated or they're up to date, I mean, these are the decisions that Google has to make now. So, I mean, now more than ever, you need to have your digital infrastructure in place.
It's funny you brought up the point about photos. I conducted a little search myself late last night, and one of the photos that was brought in for one of the hotels that Google recommended for me, it was UGC content. So it was something that, like, I guess a user had left as part of their review of the hotel. And that was like placed as like the hero image of the hotel. And it honestly looked horrible. Like, it was just like, the photo was like fine, but it was clear, it was taken on someone's iPhone. It wasn't a professional photo at all. And so, but immediately I was like, oh, what's that? And I scrolled to the next option. So yeah, to your point, I think getting your digital infrastructure, I like the way that you put that, Scott, set up is crucial. And again, you're not optimizing for humans anymore, right? You're optimizing for agents and how they're going to interact with your content. So very, very interesting to see how this all plays out. I think from a consumer experience, I've wanted this for years. I want it to be incredibly specific about what I want, what I don't want in a place. And I've wanted these recommendations to be curated for me. So I'm super excited about this. I do think the $1 million question is, how much choice will they give to where the booking is actually placed? And depending on how they do that, I think it'll be a massive win for everyone, for independents as much as the big brands, or a massive loss. Yep. So we'll see. All right, gentlemen, it is time for I think everyone's favorite segment of the week. The jury's still out, but I've gotten lots of texts and DMs about everyone loves Spice of the Week. For listeners who might be joining us for the first time, Spice of the Week can be anything hot, trendy that we're paying attention to. It could be a helpful tip that we've experimented with in our own businesses that we want to share with you. It could just be a random musing that we've had after doom scrolling on LinkedIn or Instagram or wherever you do your doom scrolling. Ben, let's kick it off with you, sir. What is your spice of the week?
Yeah, so it actually kind of goes back a little bit to this whole master lease debacle we're seeing with Sondor and LuxUrban and all the rest. So I actually want to, my spice of the week is showcasing the benefits and positive sides of the lease model. So we have a land lease model for Bahia, my tropical landscape hotel that we're building in South Florida. We have a 99-year lease. So with that 99-year lease, we can still sell at a cap rate. Like if we own the hotel, we can finance the property with traditional debt. It has much of the same benefits as owning the property, but we have to put way less money down up front. Our lease is structured with a percentage of revenue, and it's a relatively low percentage of revenue. Typically, we're targeting between 3 and 10% of revenue, depending on if there's a fixed cost or minimum rent component as well. And I think that if you keep these leases variable based on revenue performance, you keep incentives aligned, and if you can lock the property up for a long enough period, then you can still have the benefits of owning property. So I think it's a great way for people who might be trying to build a landscape hotel or, create a hotel in a prime urban environment. I know this has happened for many, many years, but I think a lot of people still don't know about it, especially those kind of getting into the hotel development world. So I wouldn't sleep on the lease strategy. It's something that when I first looked at the Bahia deal, it gave me pause because I had always owned the dirt before with my properties, but I came to see it as a big benefit and a big competitive advantage for us because we don't have to put the money down. Our cost of purchasing the land and paying monthly payments on that would be cost prohibitive. Like we wouldn't be able to do the project if we had to buy the land outright. And now we're doing a revenue share with the farmer. So they win, they're getting 3 to 4x what they would be getting, just farming the land and renting out part of it to a nursery. And we're getting a significantly reduced cost of operation as opposed to if we had to buy it. So I think land lease, when done right, the lease model can really work. But it all comes down to how you structure it and making sure incentives are aligned.
Amazing. I love that. That is spicy, especially in this environment that we find ourselves in over the last couple of weeks, Ben. But I love those examples. That's great. Edwin, let's go to you, sir. What is your spice of the week this fine week?
Just before I was about to sign off last night, I read that Citizen M, a company I admire, is changing name to another star. And the story there is they started in 2006. Their project name was One Star is Born. That then gave birth to Citizen M. They're now obviously purchased and they changed names. And my first reaction was, why? I like their logo, their pinkish red, and it made a lot of sense. This is a hugely costly exercise, and I'm sure I'm not privy to all the information of why they want to do it. There must be underlying reasons, but we all know that sometimes a name really doesn't matter. And if you've built such a great name for yourself already, why change it now? So it was Leonard, the CEO, who put the story out. I haven't seen anything since. I don't think there's real reasons for it, except that they want to get back to what the original intention of the name was. Another star opens itself for a lot of jokes. I think if the service isn't good, I think it's a scary one. But that's not up to me to judge. But sometimes when you look at massive operations like this and the cost involved, and the re-educating your entire world on a brand that already made its name, my first question is always why. But we'll see.
Yeah, I like that. That's a good one. I saw that too, and I thought I had very similar sentiments, Edwin, about why. But yeah, it'll be interesting to see if there is a story here and how it develops, and depending on the public's feedback on this change, maybe we'll include that in a little segment in a future week. I'll go quick and before we close out with you, Scott. But my spice of the week is around star ratings. So it's not that spicy to say that the star ratings don't matter anymore. People have been saying this for a long time, but I've been thinking a lot about what will be the rating mechanism that consumers care about in the future. So you got, Michelin keys, I think was a really, really wise move by Michelin, even in my, friend circles now, who people that don't pay any attention to hospitality until they're like booking a stay. They now look at Michelin keys as an indicator of where to go. So even in a relatively short period of time, I think that the general consumer has really latched onto that as a key mechanism when considering where to go, which is great. So I do think we're going to need some mechanism for that is universally agreed upon, right, by some general public. Maybe it's a star rating, but I think in general there's going to be this another rating system that focuses more on like the soul of a property. So thinking through like, all right, like what are the mechanisms? Forget the 5-star rating. Luxury, as we know, is dramatically changing. The difference between a 4 and 5-star hotel has traditionally been its service. Do people still care about that level of service? Does the average consumer still care about that level of service today? I think the jury's still out on that. So I think that we will reimagine a new rating system for hospitality experiences. And I think it's going to come from Gen Z. Quite frankly, I think that the way that Gen Z talks and thinks, right, about travel, about experiences is fundamentally different than even, myself as a millennial does. And so I think that, again, jury's still out on what this will look like and what it will feel like and whether people will buy into it or not. But I do believe that the rating system is going to be dramatically disrupted, and the way that we think about what makes a great stay versus an okay stay versus a terrible stay is going to shift. And I think it's actually going to come sooner than we expect. So my prediction is in the next year or two, we're going to see an upheaval of the 5-star rating, and it's going to look a lot different than it does today. Scott, let's go with you, sir. What is your spice of the week?
So something I've been thinking about lately a lot is the emotional fatigue of travelers. Not burnout, not stress, but the emotional heaviness people are carrying around through their everyday lives. It shows up in how they travel. People aren't just looking for rest. They're looking for an emotional reset, and they're looking for grounding. They're looking for moments that bring them back to themselves. And the hospitality industry is not talking about this at all. Hotels talk about wellness. They talk about spas. They talk about amenities. But emotional fatigue is very different. It's deeper. It's what makes a traveler walk into a lobby and say, I need to breathe for a minute. And hotels that learn how to create emotional safety will outperform everybody in their comp set very, very quickly. This could be as simple as lighting design, sound design, scent profiles that calm the mind, staff trained to recognize emotional cues, or spaces intentionally built for decompression rather than Instagram. This isn't luxury. This isn't wellness. This is the next evolution of human hospitality. And as the world gets heavier, which it's not getting lighter, hotels that master emotional resets will win.
Oh, dude, that's fantastic. I love that. Is there an example, Ben? You just got back from a more wellness in that maybe the traditional sense that Scott outlined, hotel experience. What is your quick take on that? Do you think that there's a big market opportunity for what Scott just outlined?
I do. I mean, I experience it. I feel like I've had more mental health in my issues in my immediate circle, like thankfully not personally, but I've experienced it in the past 5 years more than I have my entire life. So yeah. I definitely think that Scott is onto something. In terms of how you do that, I mean, for me, and I think a lot of people are like this. It's like, how do you bring the outdoors indoors? How do you give me more green space? There's a calming effect of that. How do you give me, good, clean food that I feel good after I eat, right? I mean, there's these things that for me allow me to, feel like I'm resetting, reconnecting to myself. to the natural world around me, be able to see the beauty in that. So that's why I always look to things like biophilic design and, how do we create more green space and bring in the outdoors indoors. So that's one way I think it can be achieved. It's interesting. I feel like there's actually a bit of a trend away from the sort of like minimalism and very sort of sensory deprivation, like rooms, if you will, almost, and experiences that might play into that sort of calming effect that Scott's talking about, in lieu of, more maximalist design, right? More in your face, more loud, that's sort of more in. So it'll be interesting to see how do those two things, play together. Can you have maximalist design and still help kind of reset the emotional nervous system and help somebody calm down? So I don't have the answer, but I think that's kind of interesting to see those two things maybe playing out at the same time.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. Yeah, go ahead, Scott.
Yeah, I honestly think both of those things can work, because for me, that loud maximized space would work for me. I want to pull my hair out of my head when I'm at a place where it's too quiet. I want to just, I go crazy. This is why I rather live in cities rather than an island that's beautiful. I think that there's room in the market for both. It's just who is going to do both well. That is always what it comes down to,
Yeah.
And you got to pick your lane and own it.
Yeah, 100%.
Right? You got to kind of go all in.
And hotels are bad at that. They're bad at going all in. They love being half pregnant. Let me just dip my toe in. Let me just see. Oh, is it cold? Oh, is it lukewarm? Are you ready? No. Okay, we won't go in yet. Just go all in.
Yeah. Be nothing to everybody.
It's crazy.
Right? It's like
people pleasers trying to be something for everybody. Absolutely.
Right.
Yep. Be bold. Hospitality people, hoteliers, be bold.
There are niches
people
that you can jump into.
You will attract your tribe.
Yep.
And if
100%.
A lot of these independent hotels, sub 100 rooms, sub 150 rooms, you don't have to cater to everybody, right?
No, you just got to do what you do very well.
And then stick to it.
100%.
Well, guys, I don't think I could have come up with a better close. That was great. We also I think we just found our cold open too with Scott's comments on being half pregnant. That's fantastic. All right, gentlemen, thank you for joining me for this wonderful conversation this week. Listeners, thank you for tuning in. If you like this content, subscribe, follow us wherever you listen to your podcast. Leave us a comment on YouTube. Give us a follow on Spotify if you have enjoyed the show over the last few episodes. Also, just rate and review us on Apple Podcasts. It's one of the best ways to help us grow the show. Gentlemen, Scott, Ben, Edwin, have a fantastic week, and we will see you next time.
Happy Thanksgiving.
Happy Thanksgiving, everybody.
Gobble, gobble.
Thanks for joining us this week. If any part of today's conversation sparked an idea or helped you think differently about the industry, we'd love to continue the conversation. You can find each of us on LinkedIn, on X, on Instagram, or whatever your preferred social platform of choice is. Links to all of our profiles are in the show notes below. This Week in Hospitality is presented by Journey. Journey is a loyalty platform built specifically for independent boutique hotels and high-touch hospitality brands. Our mission is to give operators the same powerful rewards engine, data intelligence, and guest insights that major chains rely on, without asking them to give up the individuality, the soul, and the story that makes their property so exceptional. At a moment when travelers are craving unique, meaningful experiences, and operators are navigating rising OTA costs, fragmented data, and shifting expectations, Journey provides a unified ecosystem that strengthens guest relationships, increases direct bookings, and helps independent properties thrive on their own terms. We're building a global, curated alliance of exceptional hotels, villas, and residences, a network that rewards exploration, empowers individuality, and gives independents the scale that they deserve. If you're an owner or operator of an extraordinary independently owned and operated hotel or residence, and if you want to see whether your property is a fit for the Journey Alliance, you can learn more and apply at alliance.journey.com. All right, friends, we'll see you next Friday. Until then, keep building experiences that are worth remembering.